Hey everyone, welcome to episode 199 of the Illustrious Gentleman. Today's episode is going to be a little different as we have kind of a happy hour setting, virtual happy hour setting, and we're going to chat with Spawn editor Thomas Healy. So since today's episode is going to be recorded a little differently, I thought I would do the blind budget beer challenge part of it at the beginning and at the end. We'll bookend the episodes with it. So if you haven't been paying attention, or if for some reason this is your first episode, if you're a huge fan of Thomas Healy and you don't care about me and Scott, and this is the first time you've ever listened to this show, for the last several weeks, I've been doing a blind beer challenge where I take 16 of the most popular kind of budget mass-produced beers in America, and I did a blind taste test, and now we're down to the final three. Bud Light has already advanced to the final, shocking no one. And so today we're going to find out which beer is going to take on Bud Light. And so I re-rank each beer each round. So in the final four, we have the second ranked beer coming out of the 16 that I chose, and it's Pacifico, Claro, La Cerveza del Pacifico. And it's going up against the number 3 ranked Bud Heavy. So tonight I'm going to do a blind taste test between Pacifico and Bud Heavy, and whichever advances after tonight will go on to take on Bud Light next week in our 200th episode. Exciting stuff, I know. So please enjoy this conversation that we have with Thomas. It's a fun night. Who can't have fun when you're just hanging out with some friends, having a couple drinks? So enjoy the episode, and then come back at the end of the episode, and we'll find out which of these beers advance. All right, episode 199. Tonight is a happy hour episode where we got Scott and I for as long as the Western Desert, the Eastern Desert internet holds up. You got Scott, you got Matt, who was a co-host a couple episodes ago. Good guy, Matt. And our guest tonight is Thomas Healy, who is an editor, and I'm sure your job has other titles at Todd McFarlane Productions, which makes Spawn comic books, which is published by Image Comic Books, which publishes Family Tree. Issue 11's coming out soon. I colored it.
So it's kind of like we're co-workers.
Yes. Colleagues, if you will.
Yeah. You guys are all deals.
All right.
All under that umbrella.
Well, let's start first then, and let's go back. Let's do that tried and true podcast thing. Thomas, what hooked you on comic books? And if it was being hoodwinked by Brigade Number 1, then we have even more in common. But what was it that kind of like, when did you start reading comics, and what was it that got you into it?
I was super, super young. Grew up in New York, Long Island, was born in Amityville. And this is back when they still had spinner racks in all the 7-Elevens. So my mother was a smoker, so you'd stop there and you'd get a pack of Bel Air. That's what she smoked. And I'd grab a comic. And I remember my first comic I had was, I believe it was Avengers 139. It was the first appearance of Taskmaster. And it's not the first appearance that everybody claims is the first appearance, which was the next one, where he was on the cover. But at the end of this issue, it's a full, you guys are comic guys, so what do you consider a first appearance? Like Hulk 180, Wolverine is in shadow in the bushes. You don't see him.
Yeah, I don't know.
181,
I think Wizard might have
out.
A little C next to the issue.
No, I wouldn't consider that the first appearance.
So in this issue of the Avengers, the last page is a full-page, fully lit body shot of Taskmaster in which he says, "My name is Taskmaster." And I just kicked the crap out of your buddies, and now I'm going to kick the crap out of you.
That's first appearance.
Exactly. But if you look at the price guide, they say the next issue is because it's the first time he's on the cover. And the whole issue is about him. But regardless, that was my first issue. And then I was a huge Fantastic Four fan, all through the John Byrne stuff and Captain America. Those were my big three right there. That got me into comics.
All right. So what was it about the Avengers, and like was it just you could get an Avengers comic anywhere, or was it something that drew you to your first 1 or 2 books?
Yeah, I mean, at first it was just I had to get them. It was anywhere. It was, again, spinner rack. They were beat to hell. They probably weren't the month they came out, but they were easy. They were cheap. I love the Fantastic Four. I loved Thing. I loved Johnny Storm. So growing up, I read a ton of those. Then once you get to high school, you could take the walk down to the Lindy's Comics in Lincoln, and that's when I started knowing what I wanted. Early X-Men stuff. Billy Petrusowitz introduced me to the X-Men during the Phoenix Saga.
Okay, yeah, that's a few years before I got into it. As a podcast that has established itself as someone who doesn't. We don't understand. We understand the concept of the Fantastic Four, but we don't understand how the Fantastic Four is done. Is there something you can enlighten us about the Fantastic Four? Like what?
I didn't care about the villains. I didn't care about Doctor Doom. Like I said, I really just enjoyed as a kid, I loved the banter between Thing and Johnny Storm. They were like bickering brothers. And I just enjoyed when they were in it together. And Johnny was making fun of them. So it was like that kind of stuff got to me. Early on, I was definitely drawn more towards the writing than I was the art, which I think is the opposite of a lot of people. I enjoyed the stories. It wasn't necessarily just the art. And I could reread the same thing over and over again. Same issue for years. Just pick it up and just reread it.
Yeah, I had the, what was it? The Fireside collection, a Jack Kirby Stanley Fireside Fantastic Four collection that I think it was like the first 3 or 4 issues and then the first appearance of like Namor. So it was like issues 1 through 4 and then issue like 6 or 7 or whenever that happened. And it was my first exposure as a kid to like Jack Kirby. And then I remember like someone gifted it to me and I'm like, oh, this isn't the Fantastic Four. This isn't what I read. And then as I grew up and whatever, like I've reread that probably more than any other book I've ever had. Like it's got like a worn out spine and everything like that. Like I think that's what bums me when I talk shit about the Fantastic Four. That's what bums me out is the concept is almost flawless. I think it has a problem in execution, but
I think it's modern. I can't say that I read it regularly. It's the old stuff. It's the old stuff that I like.
Right. Right.
Like the first that I actively then collected as a comic book collector was, I would probably say, X Factor. Like I was introduced to the X-Men. They spun off into X Factor. Will Spertasio, Archangel, who I loved. I mean, obviously he was later on, but that I had that whole run. I was very proud going into high school, and it was probably a bad thing on my point to be. I think this is a point of pride to people, but I had that whole X Factor run until they switched it over, and then like Havoc came in Polaris, and they switched the whole team up. But no, that original
don't fuck with Strong Guy. Yeah,
didn't dislike it, but I loved that. I mean, it brought you Ahab, it brought you Rachel, Cable, all that stuff took place in X Factor, and that was just awesome. It was great art.
Yeah, I remember at the time thinking like this is such a cool concept because that's a easy way to bring in like someone 15 years older than me that doesn't know the new X-Men. You have the X-Men. I mean, essentially what Bendis and Stewart did, with new X-Men or whatever the hell it was called.
Is X Factor without random even X Factor?
Scott, do you have a question for Thomas?
Not yet. Not until we start talking about Spawn.
Okay, so we can talk about...
I graduated in 1992. That's when I graduated high school. Coincidentally, the year Spawn #1 came out.
Okay.
I don't think that's a coincidence.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was being groomed.
So let me knock out a question here before we get into it. I guess it is the question. As someone who's like our age, I mean, I think you and I are the same age bracket. The other two are a little bit younger. But as someone who's in the same age group as me, like how cool is it? Like how rad is it to think if you stop to think about the fact that you work, Todd McFarlane's your boss.
Yes.
Because there's an entire generation of us who wanted Todd, in various iterations, wanted Todd to be our boss. And then there's lots of us who've had Todd as a boss. It's because of where we live. I know multiple people that have worked for Todd. But when you stop to think about it, how does it register with you, or can you separate it and be like, well, I just got to work, and then I know in 10 years this is going to blow my mind, or what is it?
Yeah, it's still random things will happen, and it'll blow me away. And I'm just like, I can't believe I'm doing this, because I remember going in to the comic shop and getting Spawn #1. And what was special about Spawn #1, and not just Spawn, but all of Image, they were I think at the time they came out, they were like $1.95, and they went up from $1.50. But they used, and we were calling it Premiere format at the time. They used a different paper. They didn't do the fadey, double smeary newsprint. It was that really nice glossy paper, and it was a different cover stock. So you picked up Spawn #1, and you picked up Action Comics. It was night and day. They were different animals entirely. And now I could argue whether or not, like, I'll be honest, I remember reading the first few Spawn issues. I was not immediately hooked. It was a little dark. I was much more of a cape and tights guy, compared to like the horror bent that took. But physically, that comic looked different than anything else. Same thing with Wildcats. Not a huge Rob Liefeld fanboy, but like but Youngblood, definitely. Shadowhawk just looked different than anything else. Witchblade, the darkness. Whoa! I'm saying that because I see your shirt and it's reminding me of that. But yeah, it just looked different. But yeah, to this day, and again, it happened on Monday. Monday was the day we sent 315 to press, 315 issues. But like, I got to reread that thing over the course of the 8 hours I'm in the office. I probably reread that issue at least 24 times.
Right.
Spelling errors, gramming errors, and then like you'll make an adjustment to. And you guys, you've done some of the back end stuff when you're self-publishing stuff. You add a comma to a speech bubble, and for some inexplicable reason, it bumps 4 panels away off the page because just something happened in InDesign. So we double check all that, but I get to open that front cover of like the book, and I get to see like my name's right under Todd's name in the same size font, which to me is pretty badass.
Yeah,
it's editor. And so my official title, you said it before. My official title is publishing coordinator.
Okay.
Flash.
Yeah, I just want to let you know on this podcast, I'm just going to throw. It's just a warning, but we don't have to get physical about it. But you can't. You're not bad mouthing Rob Liefeld on the Illustrious Gentleman. So let's just keep it civil.
He did threaten to kick my ass once.
Yeah, I'm number 2. Okay, so don't let it. I'm just saying, don't bring it up again in a derogatory term, unless you're going to talk about the guy who led them to Image Comics. Whatever, it's a whole different podcast.
So that's it. Yeah. So to answer your question in a roundabout way, yes, I still get surprised. I spent the day in the office. You probably saw my Instagram. I spent the day in the office yesterday. You guys are familiar with Comics Pro, the retailer organization?
I know who it is through the retailer. I know the retailer I hang out with on a regular basis. But yeah, it's a convention for publishers and for retailers.
Yeah, it's a retailer advocacy group. So we were shooting stuff yesterday for the Image presentation. But yeah, and it's like I'm sitting there all day, and Todd will say something, and I'll literally be like, "No, man, you got to do that again. That I didn't feel that. I want your passion." And it's like I'm directing Todd McFarlane. And again, it is absolutely a pinch me moment, because I would never have thought this. I've always wanted to be in comics, but I've always wanted to like just write my own stuff, do my own stuff. And this kind of just fell in my lap. And I just incredibly lucky. And I realized that.
I've never heard that guy say anything that wasn't passionate.
I was gonna say,
No,
I can't see Todd.
He is. It was just we had done it so many times. We wanted to have a lot of it, but no, there's a lot, I think, of what people assume he is like, and I will be a defender of him, because I very few creators that I have seen that are of that level have I ever seen treat the fans as good as he does. And the people that say like he's just in it for money, it's like, not anymore. Like, it's literally his love of making comic books. That's it. He doesn't need it. he's doing this, and he's so like proud of 300, not because it's sold well, but it's like, I did that. Like, I found an image, and I'm the only one there that's still stuck by my guns and did this. Eric Larson, yes, still too as well. But like the other ones, how many times has Witchblade started and stopped? Who knows who owns Youngblood anymore? I don't know, but like, he's very proud of that, and I think he has a right to be.
So I can imagine like he and Larson having a spy versus spy thing going on now, and they're just every time they see each other, they're trying to drop a piano or an anvil on each other or whatever. So
yeah, I've never had the opportunity to be in the same room with them at the same time, but everybody that has kind of describes them as they are just like brothers. There's always that rivalry between them. They'll still go to bat for each other, but that doesn't mean that they want to work on a book together ever again.
Yeah, there's I probably told the story at least twice on this podcast, but who cares? I'm the editor. And it's when we had the drink and draw, the second year of Acme, when Eric Larson came out, he called Todd and said, I'm in the area. And then Todd showed up, and we were at this little bar, like kind of a dingy sports bar, which is my favorite sports bar, but I'm not going to shout them out because they don't pay me to. And so we're at this bar, and I had a nib, like a Japanese like dip nib, and Eric had sketched a Savage Dragon, and kind of like he wanted to try out my nib, so Eric had kind of inked it. Then Todd shows up, and everyone blows their wad because Todd's there, and rightfully so. But Todd Father's there, so we're all like hanging out, and then he looks at this sketch of Savage Dragon that's already been inked. And he picks the same nib that Eric Larson had used and embellishes it more. And the best part was the whole time he's embellishing it, Eric Larson is telling him that was already inked. Like, you're not inking it. It was already inked. You're just messing around on it. But I just loved it because it was my nib. Right across from me is Todd McFarlane. Right to my left is Eric Larson. To his left is Eric Canetti. Like these titans that I've adored, I basically hoodwinked a local retailer into paying me to bring them out, and shout out to that retailer. But yeah, so then a couple months later, there's a variant cover for Savage Dragon, and it's that sketch, and it's like inked by Todd McFarlane, penciled by Eric Larson, and so that's my big Todd story is.
So did you take that nib and like put it in like one of Todd's like baseball collectible boxes, have it on your wall somewhere?
Is it framed in a shadow box
touched
somewhere?
by Todd and
No. Nope. No.
Did you mention it ended up being a cover?
Yes, I just said that.
Yeah, I wasn't listening.
I know. So if you're the coordinator, Thomas, tell us what you do. So you started as kind of being I don't want to say office coordinator, but like a publishing coordinator for TMP, and then now you've morphed into getting the editor title. So did anything change, or did it kind of like, I do all this already, so it's kind of a recognition thing, or did you take on additional duties to be the editor, or was it just natural? Walk us through your time.
So when I originally got hired, it was to be the publishing coordinator, which is I babysit all the hour. That's what it was. So it was, hey, so-and-so needs to get his pages. At the time, it was Jason Sean Alexander was the current artist on there. Peter Steigerwald was doing colors. Peter still does colors for us. Jason obviously moved on to Philadelphia, which has been a huge success. They were amazing to work with. But basically, it'd be like, hey, here's our deadline. We need X amount of days to prep the book and get it to the printer. So it'd be the phone calls of like, hey, just checking in, man. If you get those pages done, let me know where you're at. Hey, Peter, make sure you get those pages done. I make sure that they get paid, that kind of stuff. At the time, I think you guys know him, John Goff, was doing more of the editorial stuff. So we were working in tandem together. He was doing the editorial stuff of like the physical, working with Todd on plot script, and basically doing a lot of that stuff. I was dealing with the talent side of things. John ended up moving along to Bungie, which was really cool. He's like one of the head writers for Bungie now. And so it was just a situation of I just absorbed those roles. So I still do that. So now we've got multiple artists working on multiple different storylines. So we have backups and stuff like that. And I basically like every day it's like, hey, hitting them up. But now I'm on the line now where I'm talking to the like Todd for plot and script stuff, or if he's got another writer working on like a pitch or something, I'll be the point of contact for that. Only because, like we were talking about earlier, he's got comics, but he's got toys and he's got stuff going on in Hollywood, and so it's certainly not a 5-day a week him dealing with comics. He's got to schedule out time from this time to this time. I deal with comics, so I'm that point of contact for all of comics basically. So if we've got, hey, we're going to do a cover artist, or I'll be like, so and so I think would be an awesome cover artist. He'll be like, well, cool, and he'll pull out his phone and be like, all right, I just texted you their phone number. Call them. Oh my God, can I really call them? All right, got that email now. Cool. So I can't name names because some of them haven't come out yet. But like, yeah, I'll be like, hey, call J. Scott Campbell. Find out where his cover is. Be like, am I allowed to do that? Cool. So it's been stuff like that. And now, he is very much the Marvel way, the Marvel method of writing. So it's the art should tell the story, and the words are secondary. So when he writes his plots, he doesn't even call them scripts. When he writes his plots for the issues, they're just breakdowns of, hey, this is what I want to happen on the page. There's a fight with Spawn and Omega Spawn, and Medieval Spawn does this, and Spawn does that. No dialogue, no panel breakdowns, nothing. Give it to Carlo, who's the current artist. Let him explore that page. Yeah, I know it's a very popular method. I get that. And then we get the art back. And then 3 days before we go to press, that's when a lot of times he's now scripting to go, okay, oh, you know what? Carlo did this in a different way than I thought. That'll change the script. So then he scripts, and it goes to Tom Orzechowski. If you're familiar with Tom, old school X-Men letterer.
He should be on my shirt, but I didn't want the type going by my belly. But Orzechowski should be on my X-Men appreciation T-shirt.
Yes, abso-freaking-lutely. But he has lettered every single issue of Spawn. Todd has not written every issue of Spawn, but Tom has lettered all 315 issues of Spawn, and he's in the Guinness Book of Records for that. But Tom will get back to speech bubbles, and then we put the book together in InDesign with myself and Todd and my production artist, who is basically the one that sits in front of the computer and does all of the stuff that we go, move that. And then at that point, I can go through and I'll edit the script, check for spelling, check for grammar. The big thing is checking for continuity stuff. Because probably like, I wrote 315. I don't remember if I said that before or if I did that or where that character was sometimes. So I do all that.
So did you have to read every prior issue?
I have read every prior issue at this point. It's taken me almost a year.
No, because that was one of the things I was thinking about when we were going to talk about Spawn, because I haven't read the book since Wills was on it. So that's like 12 years ago. But then I was thinking about it because I've been following Jason for I don't know how many years on Instagram, and I saw he was doing Spawn. I was wondering how, I was wondering if the artist determined how the storyline was going to go, because he's such a different artist from Carlo or Ken or some of the other people I've seen that have done it in the past few years. So
yeah. Absolutely.
Determine things for you guys.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. Again, Jason was on for just a bit before he was prepping to leave for Philadelphia, but I did get to work with him. And then obviously we had Jim Muñez, we had Philip Tan for a little bit, Ken Lashley, who I'm a huge fan of, and then Carlo kind of became the regular guy. But yeah, I absolutely think that. I know that from what Todd has said, Wills was some of his favorite stuff visually. Obviously, Todd McFarlane loves Greg Capullo. They're like best friends. So he's always going to talk about Greg Capullo being like the greatest Spawn artist of all time. But I know that Todd really enjoyed Wills Portacio stuff because we've used a lot of those character designs for reference for stuff. because he's like, I really liked how he drew Mark, so make sure we give them that version of Mark. But yeah, when Jason's stuff came on, I mean, that's dark. That's a lot of shadows. And if you go through and read the story, it was definitely much more of a dark place. It was Spawn in the shadows. He did that whole line when he was in the prison. So yeah, I think the art kind of style really does change it. So transitioning from that, there were a couple of, again, some weird kind of small 1-shot or 2-shot storylines with these various artists. Philip Tan actually kind of co-wrote his, where they kind of went to the future for 2 issues. He pitched that idea to Todd and kind of co-plotted that. But now that Carlo's on, we're kind of seeing this kind of a reemergence into more of like classic Spawn comic booky stuff. So yeah, I do think that he is a big proponent of letting the artist kind of set the tone for some of the stuff, and then scripting around their skills, which is very, very different, because I've done some self-published stuff. I've been in some anthologies with some of you guys as well, some of the Sean stuff, and I've always been one of those guys because I loved reading like Bendis's script books, and Warren Ellis put out some script books for some of his X-Men run, and it was very much. And Scott already threw up the devil horns because he appreciated the art forward style, and Bendis and Warren Ellis were very much like, panel 1, this is exactly what happens. Panel 2, this is what happens. And so like there was no deviating from that. Now you could probably explore those panels in one way or another, but very much they set it out. Where Todd's more like, hey, there's a fight. Give me 2 pages of that fight.
Did I mishear? Did you say you've got multiple artists working on multiple stories to have backups for stuff?
Yeah. So like we've got a couple of different, nothing's been announced, so I won't say names, but yeah, like Carlo's our regular guy, but he might need a vacation. So we've got another artist doing like, hey, here's a 3-issue little, it's not going to be a mini series. It'll fit into Spawn. But like if a storyline wraps up and Carlo's like, hey, I want to take a vacation. Well, cool. We've got 3 issues lined up. You can take a vacation for 3 months. Not that he'd be off 3 months, but he could take that time off. And then when he comes back, he'd start working on his issues. So when those 3 were done, boom, we've got those ahead. So the goal is always to have as much in the can ready to go as possible.
All right. So to follow that up, like two-part question. I know the big knock on Image, and I'm a huge Image guy, obviously. The knock on Image when they first started was delays and stuff like that. So is it in Todd's publishing history, which I don't know as much about nearly as you? Will he do a fill-in, or will he, like, is it important to him to stay on top, or does he just want backup stories to fill in for, like, what he put in? Is it important to hit every month, or is it more important to just have constant issues?
We need to hit every month. That's my goal. Since I took over as editor, we have not had any delays.
So he runs like a bullpen like thing where he has like like cabinet issues or whatever they can pull out if something's late. He has like inventory issues, or he wants to. The idea
he wants to. Coming out of Jason's run, there wasn't any, but now the thought is there will be some. I mean, the goal is to always have that book out in the first week of the month. We haven't had any lates since I took over. We haven't had any delays. 300 was delayed, I think, 2 weeks, only because they had so many different artists doing interior stuff. I mean, Scott Snyder was writing like 5 pages for it, and Capullo was doing stuff. I mean, there was just so many moving pieces for that. But yeah, I mean, the goal is to not necessarily have those backup issues, because again, like you said, he's an artist first and foremost, and listening to him pitch an artist to like, hey, I want you to come on board. I want you to work for me. He's always like, I don't want you to have to work 15-hour days, 6 days a week to get your book in. He's like, I want to give you that time. Like, you need the weekend because your wife's going to be mad at me if you don't get to spend time with your wife on Saturday and Sunday. So he's really doing it more for the artist to be able, like, again, for Carlo to be able to, like, man, I need a vacation. I need to take some time off. And it's like, well, cool. We don't have to worry about it. We're not really in a position that we have to worry about for Carlo not finishing. simply because we've got a good machine going with J. David Ramos as our colorist presently, Tom lettering, and Carlo does his own inking. He just turns in complete pages. So it's been a really good machine since he took over on 310, and it's been solid. He's just a machine. So it's worked out well for us. But again, yeah, those backup issues are not necessarily for an emergency. It's just more along the lines of, this artist is really cool, and he's got a gap between this issue for Marvel and then the new one he's starting for DC. I can get him for 2 months to do 2 issues for us. And we've got that. So if and when we need a break, there you go. Now we've got this cool artist that everybody knows the name of, and we can slot his book in.
I was just going to say, that just reminds me of like X-Men back in the day. Because they would do that bi-weekly run forever, and then it seemed like a whole bunch of the issues like leading up to like Gambit coming in and Extinction Agenda and all that, they'd have all those random like fill-in stories, because it was obvious Jim and those other guys were getting some time off before they had to do those big things. So you got to keep a book coming out, so it makes sense. And some of those were really cool.
Yeah.
So
I would not want to be in charge of a biweekly book.
How do you think working at being an employee at a retailer at a comic book shop and then managing a comic book shop? Do you think that gives you any insight into how to market? Do you give advice to your boss, Mr. McFarlane, about that, or is it just
Sounds
being
like
absorbed into that world, or does it?
No, it absolutely does. He asks me about that all the time. What would you have done? Would you have ordered this? Why are secret variants? Why does anybody care about those? That kind of stuff. He's a big fan. I mean, like, Spawn is still one of the few books. It's $2.99. He has no plans on increasing that. He's like, I want anybody to be able to pick that book up. He's like, regular books are going to be $4.99 within the next 2 years. He goes, I'm going to stay at $2.99 for Spawn. Because he wants anybody to get it. He's not. We're doing like some variants right now because we've got some Capullo covers, and that he's inking over. So Image has kind of been like, hey, some of these variants do really, really well. So we've done some of the 1 in 50, those raw, like where it's untouched. It literally is just the untouched pencils. You can still see the blue lines. Like we're not like digitally altering them. It's just the raw pencil sketches, and people love that. And I'm a big fan of that. So we're doing that. But for the most part, like, Todd's not a huge, people always joke around with Todd about like, oh, he just wants the money. But it's like, he argues every issue should be $2.99. Like, why do I need to do ratio variants? Let's just put out a bunch of cool covers and sell them all at that. But for the Capullo ones, we did something special for, because we're doing the overship stuff as well, which is for retailers. So if they order like 20% over their regular numbers, they just get free Spawn issues that they can price out for whatever. So that's been really popular. But for the most part, he'll ask me all the time, like, what cover would catch your eye? How are most shops marketed? That kind of stuff. So yeah, I think my background as a retailer was helpful. My background as a hospice worker isn't particularly helpful, but the retailer part of it was helpful.
That's awesome.
That's what I did for 9 years between Atomic and Samurai. So, but that's what I did the job, because I was a volunteer coordinator for hospice. So I managed all these people in very, very stressful situations. So I think on my resume that looked good. Yeah, that's what looked good. Because artists, I don't know if you guys know this, but artists can be big babies. They really can.
I thought it was because I wanted to die.
No, that though I have talked with you off the ledge. We'll leave it at that.
Maybe you should text Thomas your number, Scott.
So, are you spitballing story ideas with Todd, or does he just have his shit and then he's just going to do it? I mean, is there a point where he says, "Oh, I was thinking about this," and then you say, "No, that's stupid"?
All the time. Like I was at the office last night until 7:30 because that's literally what we were doing, and that is one of the best parts of my job, without a doubt, is just being able to sit in a room in Todd's office or one of the conference rooms, and just the two of us to be like, this is what I was thinking about doing. And I can go, well, that's cool because we could tie it into this. Or I was thinking about this. What if you did this with that character? Because we weren't really planning on anything and doing that. And absolutely, that's it.
Is it like working? Is like if you're a Japanese businessman and you can't leave before Todd leaves? Like you have to.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. It's Even when we were all in the office regularly, it's kind of like a lot of people. It's just that it's that kind of job. Like, I mean, you guys know, it's like you don't need to be in DC headquarters to do your job. And Todd's got so much going on. Like, he's not working an 8 to 5. I mean, he's working all the time, but he may not be in the office. So yeah, it's kind of a situation. It's like, you work with where you need to work. I might have to work on a Sunday because we always go to press on Mondays. So depending on where we are in that process, like I might work Sunday, and Monday I might be working until 2 a.m. And I'm sleeping in on Tuesday. There's no reason for me to be at my computer at 8 a.m. because we've got now a month to put that next book out.
Yeah, it's like
so it's not that scenario.
Yeah, it's like resetting the clock. As soon as it goes to print, reset the clock for like 30 or 29 days.
It's exactly what it is. I mean, yeah, both of you know, and it's what. Yeah, that's the greatest feeling. It's like, oh, that next day. That's the worst part of the job is the physical process of me getting it to the printer. A single issue isn't bad. We just put out the Spawn. It's the first time we're doing it. It's the Spawn Color Compendium. So it's the first 50 issues in one book. So it's fat like a phone book, but it's not hardcover. It's floppy. So I think it's only like $50, but it's the first 50 issues. It's 1,136 pages. I had to be logged into our printer and manually review and approve every single page. Like you can't upload in bulk. You have to go through every single one because you got to check the bleed. You got to check, is this spot color going to be off? Is it the right black? Because there's InDesign black and Photoshop black are different. These are all shits I learned that I had no clue about. It took me 8 hours and 45 minutes to approve that book from just sitting at my computer. And it's totally repetitive stress because all I had to do was go, scroll, approve, next, approve, next. That was it for 8.5 hours. Well, I will say, if you're interested in color, because I know you're a colorist, and I love the palette you guys are using for.
Yeah, I'm a professional. Sure.
I know. But we added a section in the book called the breakdown, and instead of like it was a letters page, but a lot of the letters, everyone's stuck at home, so it was a lot of grumpy letters. So
Spawn's rad. I love Spawn.
So I just wanted to put something new. So I started doing this thing called the breakdown, where I interview people about with the process of physically putting the book together. So we showed like the A to B in the first one. The last one I interviewed Greg Capullo about his doing covers and stuff like that. But this last one was super interesting. I got to interview Brian Haberlin, and he talked about the color process and about mother colors and all of that. So I learned a lot about the coloring process from talking to him about that. And I do believe it's way more interesting than people give it. And it's a lot more skill-based. Incredibly talented, Brian.
For the whole group, what about a memorable Spawn issue? And I have one in my head. And if it doesn't get taken, I'll take it. But we'll go to Thomas first. We'll go counterclockwise.
The first issue that like really still pops in my mind is when Spawn went up against the Ku Klux Klan. When he was down the South, and he went up against the judge, and he turned the judge black and dressed him in his robes and then dropped him off in the middle of town, and the Klan didn't know that was the judge, and they ended up lynching him. And that's something that's come up in some discussions, because it's like Spawn is a black superhero. And there is a lot of people that go, why is he not dealing with more social justice stuff, especially nowadays? And a lot of the conversation that Todd has had is like, I don't know if I'm the right person to write that. Like, yes, Spawn's black because at the time I just made the character black.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, and I think he wants to address it, and I think he might, but he doesn't want it to be like, look at the rich white dude talking about social justice and what needs to be done. Like, well, that's really tone deaf. And I think he's intentionally wanting to avoid that, even though he might side with that. But it's just something that I think he needs to tread carefully on. In the 90s, he could do it a little bit more because it was not for a lot of it was a punchline for the 90s and stuff like that. Now it's a much more of a hot button, and I think he wants to make sure he's not offending anybody that he's trying to potentially help. So, but that's an issue that always stuck out to me.
Yeah, we got to give him credit because he did create a minority character in a major role when it wasn't the cool thing to do. It wasn't the hip thing to do or whatever. He just did it because for whatever reason he did it. It fit his story. It was something he wanted to do, and he did it, and that is commendable. Like, it's not – he didn't do it 2 years ago after, Miles Morales got big or whatever. He did it back in the day. Yeah.
Everybody just pretends like Turok just isn't a thing. The first cover I see when I close my eyes is the cover to 9, and I would think...
Was it the hands?
No, that's the Angela issue. And people that aren't probably Spawn readers, that's probably the only story they know about the book is Todd versus Neil on that particular issue.
Yeah.
The Cerebus issue, that I see that cover in my head. I remember getting excited about him getting a new costume in issue 32. I think it was.
Great Capullo costume, baby.
And it was just like a different boot
and a gauntlet.
Oh, the first
gauntlet
Capullo issue though. I think he did 16, 17, and 18 was his first arc, and it was versus the Redeemer.
Yep.
And
great.
What?
It was great.
Yeah. And is Spawn versus sort of anti-Spawn, which would be like good Spawn, is kind of interesting. Like, not like, you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Like Heaven Spawn.
I just reread those issues this past week, and it was called Anti-Spawn. Yeah, it was a little ridiculous.
Was it really?
Yeah, before he was called Redeemer, he was called Anti-Spawn. And his belt buckle, it didn't have a cross on it. It had the Spawn logo with a circle and a slash through it. Yeah. You could do that in the 90s. But yeah, it was called Anti-Spawn. And then he evolved a little bit more.
No, I always think of issue 1, just because Thomas brought it up earlier, but it's like, I was used to Todd drawing Spider-Man and capes, just innocent comics. So like Violator rips that dude's heart out first issue. I was like, whoa, I think I was 8th grade when that came out for me. Maybe freshman year, I can't remember, but somewhere in that time frame. So that one always stood out, and the other one too was I want to say John Wayne Gacy, but I can't remember if it was
Ice Cream Guy.
Billy Kincaid.
But yeah, he like fights like some serial killer clown and kills him.
I had his Wildstorms card.
Yeah.
Nice. Little serial killer collectible trading cards.
Yeah,
nice.
You could play him in the collectible card game.
Oh, that's horrible. I did not know that. That is horrible. I was going to find a set of that. Yeah, that was
pretty shitty. I mean,
Billy Kincaid.
Yeah, versus Supreme. What the fuck is he going to do?
Yes. But yeah, there's a bunch, and then I brought up earlier, but I wasn't a huge Spawn fan at that point, but I really liked the work Wills did in the books. I think that started around 186, and then however long his run was, I read most of those. Something's cool. I think that was definitely more of art over anything else. But I think with anything with Spawn, for me, it's always been about the art. So, it's just Todd and Greg. I mean, there's always been superstars on this book. So
Yeah, I'm going to say only because I am not an artist at all, like the three of you guys, but I've always been fascinated with typography, and even if you've got comic fans watching this, and even if you're not a fan of Spawn, it's too dark or whatever, you're not a Todd McFarlane fan, it's worth it to just look through those first 50 issues, because I'll go back to him again. Tom Orzechowski's lettering on those is unparalleled. It is absolutely insane. Everything is hand lettered. The Spawn logo was hand drawn by Tom. He's still working on it for now, but his stuff there, just the way they set the lettering as inset into some of the art. And there's a fight scene. I think it's in it might still be in issue 8, the one you're talking about, Matt, where it's Violator and Spawn having their first fight. And one of those pages, there's no lettering. It's literally, I mean, it's not, excuse me, there's no art. It's literally nothing but lettering of the fight, like biff, bam, boom. And he gave Tom an entire page. And the only thing you see is, I think he had cut Spawn's arm off. So you see Spawn's arm flying across the page, but everything else is just Tom lettering sound effects to describe what's happening on the page. And I've seen some of the originals, and it's just absolutely amazing. His lettering is some of the best in comics ever in those first 50 issues.
God damn it. I'm getting like nostalgic for
well,
Spawn.
yeah, whenever
I might be purchasing this 50 issue omnibus. The discussion currently just feels like a warm blanket right now.
Thomas mentioned earlier that it's colored, but even if it wasn't colored, like, let me get 50 issues, the majority drawn by Greg Capullo, and then the other half drawn by fucking Todd McFarlane. Yeah, let's do it. I'll put it next to my Bone collection. Yeah. The complete Bone. By the way.
Just thinking about like the Spawn word balloon with like the
double,
the with like the brush steel sort of looking circle around it is giving me.
I will get you. Tell you what, I will get the three of you copies of that. It comes out this month. It comes out on the 24th.
24th, one day after DC Future State House of L #1 comes out the day after that.
I think that
is there a better week in comics at all this year?
No,
that Violator issue I think is 4. Isn't that the cover? Violator is on cover 4.
Yep.
Yeah. So when I think about Spawn, I do think about that issue 9. I do think about that issue 9 Angela issue. And I remember thinking, like, that's a great character. And then even when, when Greg did the miniseries, great character. And then just like, I guess I don't give a shit about the whole Marvel. I know the lawsuit that went on with it. For back then, like, that Angela character to me is Spawn. And that cover, issue 9, Scott's talking about, she's in profile and the ribbons are going everywhere. Yeah, that to me is Spawn. Because that's when, I think that's, in my mind, that's when Todd is like, oh, there's a universe here. It's not just about this guy. And it's not about the countdown and the stuff that he had going on in the first issues. Like, this is Spawn. He's like, I'm creating a universe, and this chick's super hot, and Greg Capullo is going to draw the shit out of her in about 6 months, and then I'll sell her.
Can we talk about the countdown?
Or not sell her. Sorry,
Can you tell me what the numbers mean, Thomas?
Yeah, that was Spawn's power meter. So, like, the maximum amount of power that a Hellspawn could have was 9,999. Every time they use their power, they lose some of that. The original concept, while Malbogia was still alive, was he gets resurrected, sent back to Earth, and you can live on Earth. You're going to do my bidding. I'm going to give you all these special powers. But the second you hit 0, your soul belongs back to me. So you've got the amount of time that timer has to make right what you have in the world. That's why we was like, well, shit, I'm going to go talk to Wanda. And and this is another moment that always got me when he tried to because he didn't remember his hamburger face.
Right. He turned
Tried
himself
to-
into a dude, and he was a white guy.
He couldn't turn himself. Yeah, exactly. He couldn't turn himself back into Al. He turned himself into a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white man.
Because that
'Cause
was
he
the
knew-
corpse, right? Wasn't that the? Wasn't it because the body
Yes.
he was actually
That was
in
the
was
body
not
he was-
Al's body?
He was in, yes. So that was his lament. Like he could never fix it with Wanda. Now, it's 300 issues, so
He was
plot
so
points
good.
have changed. He's died, he's been resurrected. That's not so much the same anymore. But we did bring the timer back. The timer's back in the issues now. Not the timer, but the counter. But that is back in the issues now. So that does still represent what his current power levels are.
And that was the idea, because it was the 90s and everybody had pouches and big fucking guns. That was part of the idea behind the big fucking guns, right? That he was going to
Yeah.
use bullets instead of spawn
Yes.
magic.
That's exactly what it was. He was a trained commando, and he couldn't risk using up all his power. So he would just go get guns, and he would just use those tactics. I honestly think, and I've heard Todd mention this in a few interviews, that he's like, yeah, I just figured, like, I didn't think it was going to work. Like, I figured we would all throw a bunch of shit up against the wall. Eventually, we'd find good titles. So the timer thing was, it gave me a reason. If the book's not doing well, he runs out of power, dies, we'll move on to the next book. That just never happened for Spawn. It just kept going. And so, but it's back now, as well as, like you mentioned, like some of the other Spawns, like Medieval Spawn and stuff like
Medieval
that.
Spawn.
They're
I'm
all
geeking out a little bit now.
Yeah. Well, they're all in the book now. Because one of the storylines at 300 was he tore a hole in time and all of the Spawns fell through.
Like
So
a
Medieval
Spawn team?
maybe.
Like a Spawn core.
Spawn Force.
Like,
Spawn Force.
you could spell core like corpse, but still pronounce it like core. But
You
corpse because they're dead.
I see where you're going with this. Hold on, I'm going to write this down.
I
Next
like
time right now.
Scott's idea better.
Yeah. So if you're a fan of some of those old characters, many of them are back, including Gunslinger, which was a huge surprise because he just drew him on the cover because we needed a variant for something, and he drew Gunslinger because Gunslinger was only in 2 issues and like a cameo in 1 issue over the course of 300 issues.
I don't remember
And-
Gunslinger. Is that a Wild West Spawn? I imagine.
Yeah.
What issues?
It-
was that?
174 and 175.
Oh, that's fine. Okay.
Yeah. So it was one of those you're talking about. It was like fill-in, 2-issue fill-ins. And it was a story about a Spawn from the Old West who was a former preacher, and his family gets murdered, and he wants vengeance against the people that killed his family. So he makes a deal with a demon, and he becomes a Spawn. And the tie-in was
be dead then.
no. At that point, it's comics. Things change. But at that time, the tie-in was in the cell with him was Al Simmons' great grandfather, who was accused of he was a Buffalo soldier, and he was accused of abandoning his post. So they were going to lynch him, and the demon goes, no, you can kill everyone in this town, but don't kill this guy. His lineage is important to us, and that was kind of the tie-in to Al had this destiny of becoming Spawn, but now that guy is back in the present day, kind of like a man at a time, like Captain America. So so a lot, So they're bringing back a lot of the classically used characters, like Medieval Spawn as well, in the modern day, as people out of time.
You remember when Medieval Spawn chopped that dragon's head off?
That was
was
cool.
I was just going to add to that Angela cover. I think the reason it was so iconic, and I think the reason so many of us think of it, because when I think of it, it reminds me of X-Men 276, which is one of the reasons I started reading comics. Because I don't know what it is, but like awesome like power poses with stark white background. Just I don't know. It just
is that a Lady Deathstrike cover?
No,
that's the cover was Wolverine. That after he stabs.
I just want to punch myself in the face. I know what that cover is. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the reason I started reading comics. So.
Yeah, that's a good cover. There's unfortunately there's some entanglement with those issues, as well as the one with the hockey player Tony Twist.
Yes, hockey. This is your thing.
But yeah, so
I hated the Blues, so fuck Tony Twist.
Yeah, but I'm a big fan of 10 as well, which is the Cerberus issue, which was interesting because it has that scene of all the hands coming out of the prison cell, and you're like, as the fan, you're like, oh, who's that? Okay, some of them are obvious, and then some of them were less than obvious, and you had to figure out. Well, that looks like Shazam. That's the Punisher in there. And then Spider-Man literally like this. He's just like literally sticking his head out. There was no hiding that.
It was so funny seeing because that was right around the time I started reading comics, and my buddies that read comics prior to me. So that was when I started reading, it was like 5th, 6th grade in that time frame. And Cerebus was one of the ones they tried to get me into. Bone being another one, and I just couldn't get into either of them. And it was just so funny when Cerebus pops up in Spawn. I was like, oh, I know this guy. And it's like, I've read a lot of these books. Okay. So, but it was like those crossovers and bringing in all those guest writers and eventually artists like Greg and everything. But that was, that's what made that book, I think, unique to me and memorable back in the day. So, because you didn't, I don't know. There's always crossovers, but I don't remember crossovers like, what do you call it, intercompany that much back then. So, there's maybe 1 or 2 DC and Marvel crossovers I can think of, but I don't know. That was a cool one.
The Spawn Batman one was popular. I mean, we still get asked about that all the time.
Batman called Spawn a twit?
Yeah, I believe so. And then at that point, I think that series ended because they did an Image one, which was Spawn Batman, and then they did the DC Batman Spawn, and the Batman Spawn ended up with Batman throwing the Batarang.
Yeah. Splash page of Batarang right there.
Which the next issue of Spawn had Spawn getting a shoelace, but they never acknowledged it was bad. He always said, "Oh, I fell." Like they never were able to say in the regular series,
right?
Batman did this to me. So like,
I remember,
and it wasn't Batman.
Yeah, I remember being in high school, and you get one of those of the crossover. You're like, "Oh, this is super cool," and you get the other one, and it's drawn by like Graham Nolan, who I like now, but back then in high school. First one, you go from Todd McFarlane to Graham Nolan.
Is that who drew the Batman one?
I would say that's who drew the Batman version, or Brayfogle, which both I did not appreciate in my time.
Yeah, Frank
but are
Miller
both great now.
Did he write the Image one? Was it or the Batman one?
Who?
Frank Miller.
He wrote the
Image one.
Both.
Todd.
Maybe both.
No, because so the DC one was Doug Minch, Chuck Dixon, Alan Grant, and Klaus Janson. That was the creative team on that. But the Image one it's McFarlane Miller.
Yeah.
That's a whole different world if you're an Image guy picking up that.
Yeah.
No, well, Image went first, I think, maybe. I think they were individual one-shots. Yes, they were individual one-shots.
Right. He said he fell.
Yeah, it was something weird. Like he said, it was something like somebody hit me, but like
what happened?
Batman.
I just fell.
But then they also did Spawn. It was like Spider-Man. They did a Spider-Man Image crossover.
Mark Bagley and yes,
I think it was Brett Booth.
Because Backlash and Spider-Man. Yeah,
Spider-Man versus Pike and Venom.
I have both of them behind me.
We were talking about the Brett Booth ones, Backlash and Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Right, but then Thomas said there was another one.
No, I said it was Backlash and Spider-Man versus Pike and Venom.
Yeah, I don't think the Pike and Venom ones were Brett Booth ones, were they?
No, I think it was all just. It was just that I'm just referring to the story.
Right.
Oh, sorry. Scott's the Brett Booth expert on the show. I wasn't quite sure.
I'm a huge Brett Booth fan, and we may or may not have him coming on to do some covers for us. That's all.
Oh my God, Scott, can you handle it?
I have a soft spot for Brett Booth. Yes.
Yeah,
It's not going to be soft for very long.
But he's absolutely he's one of my all-time favorites. I love Backlash. I love his early Wildstorm stuff. I was probably one of the only 3 people, me and Scott, that were reading Wild Core, Deep Cut with Backlash and Tapestry, Threnody.
Surge.
Yeah, I just like following Brett because at least one on Twitter, because at least once a week, and I'm assuming you follow him too, Scott. At least once a week, he posts an image of a Wildstorm character and goes, "Man, I really wish DC would do something with these goddamn characters."
Yeah. Now that
he's
somebody
just
mentioned
a little
Pike,
rubber.
I forgot that DC owned Pike. I'm going to be hammering my editor. I'm going to be like, I want to see fucking Pike in the next issue. Or I walk.
Pike versus Connor. There you go. It's the fight everybody's been waiting for.
Or you walk. They're like, hey, here's another Superman annual. And you're like, if it doesn't have Pike in it, I'm not interested. Yeah, so when we end this, we'll cut to what I thought about the beer challenge, which we now have our top 2.
Matter. Natty lost, and so you're wrong already. So, anyways.
Jesus Christ. I never thought I would ever be friends with someone who was a Natty apologist, especially someone in their 40s who's a Natty apologist. Thomas, where can people, what do you want to promote? Where can people go to find the news shit about Spawn? Where can we follow you for your recipes and your drinking?
I'm at Thomas Healy on Instagram and Twitter. That's what I was an early adopter, so I got my name in both spots. So that's it. I talk about news and stuff because if we've got stuff coming out. But if you really want to see it, follow Todd McFarlane on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, because a lot of times he makes videos in his office and he just reaches and he shows stuff because he's doing live videos and he shows stuff that he's not supposed to. So he's spoiled a lot of various DC figures coming to market because he was excited and he was like, "Oh, check this out!" And then like his assistant will get a call 5 minutes later from a DC rep going, "Why did he do that? We haven't announced that yet." So it's a great spot to get secret information on stuff.
Sweet.
The compendium's coming out on the end of the month.
Okay.
So if you're interested in Spawn after all this, 50 issues. I think it's like $59.99 or $49.99, something like that. Not bad at all.
Yeah. And then for Scott, House of L, #1 of 1, comes out on February 23rd. Because of my comps, I'm going to say Family Tree #11 comes out on February 10th. So everyone go to your local stores, pick up Spawn.
What's the time to get for your sweetheart?
That's right. Spawn 115 is out in a couple weeks. Thomas?
Spawn 315, yes, a couple weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. You good, Scott? Send us home. Wait, no. Before you send us home, after Scott says what Scott says, don't turn it off because then you got to go to the end of the beer segment where I tell you what advances to the finals for episode 200.
Through editing magic, can't that be right now?
Hey, wow. What an episode, huh? Man, stuff you learn on the Illustrious Gentleman. But yeah, so I had Pacifico against Budweiser. Only one would advance to the finals to take on the juggernaut that is Bud Light. And I'm proud to say Pacifico advances. So the original #1 or #12 overall seed, the reseeded #2 advances to take on Bud Light next week in the final of the Blind Beer Challenge. Bud Light versus Pacifico. Be there. So Scott, just do what you got to do for episode 199.
All right. Fuck all y'all. Peace.